Now that you're ready to carve, it's time for you to learn about the carving tools and the blades and what you have to use and the different effects they make. So we're going to set this aside and we're going to talk about the blades. These are linoleum carving tools, and you probably can't see it, but there are numbers on the back. So if you see this flat surface, there's numbers on the back. This is a number 1, and this is I call it the V-liner tool. It's just a tiny little tool. And I'm going to use my hands as kind of a guide to show you what the blade looks like. So the blade actually looks like a tiny little V, and it's used for very, very, very small details, such as when I was carving my owl out, in the previous example I showed you, this tool was used to cut these tiny, tiny little lines right in here. So really it's for very, very, very tiny, small details. The other thing that is important for you to know is how to change the blade, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So a number 1 is just a teeny tiny little V, and you'll notice that each one of these is going to progress as we go. So a number 2 blade, okay, again the number 2 is right here. A number 2 blade is the same as a number 1, except that it's taller. So it just has a depth. It digs deeper into the linoleum, but there's still a point at the bottom. The number 3 blade is a blade that, instead of still coming down to a point, it's more of a curve. So the curve is a little bit wider down at the bottom instead of a point. A number 4 blade is a blade that is more square. So I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to show you here. The number 4 blade is more square, which means it comes down, over, and then up. So it has a square bottom to it. And then the number 5 blade is a scoop. So it's got more of a wider curve, just like this. Now I'm showing you the bigger blades because they're a little bit easier to see. But let me show you the effect that they all have. So you can see here, this is a number 1, how tiny the line is. Number 2, see if I can get this angled a little bit better for you. A number 3, a number 4, you can see this is a little bit more square, okay, because you have that square bottom. And then this is a little bit more curved, it's rounded. So when you're removing large areas, then the 4 or 5 might be good. Most students like to use the 2 or the 3. I would say the 2 is probably the more popular tool, but I would say the 2 or 3 range. And then 1, 4, and 5 gets used periodically, depending on your design. So the next step is teaching you how to change the blade. You all know lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, I hope. So left to loosen up this little dial here. And then the blade, once you loosen it up, the blade, you might just have to kind of wiggle it a little bit, and the blade will pop out. Okay? This is the part that gets put, and actually with this you can probably very slightly see the number 5 right here. If I turn it the other way, you can see the number 5 blade right stamped on the back. Let me show you how this goes together. Please don't ever undo this whole thing. If you can't get the blade out, come and see me, because there are little parts in here, and once they go missing, I can't put it back together, and then you're left with this, and the blade and this cutter is no longer usable. So there's 2 different pieces inside this container, and what's going to happen when you're doing this, when you're putting the blade in, is this piece is going to go in between these 2 pieces, and then when you put this on top and you tighten this up, that's going to help hold the blade in. Okay, so I'm just showing you the mechanics and the workings of this, but I don't want you pulling it apart. If you're having issues with getting the blade out or putting it in, come see me. And as you can see, there's 2 different sections here. So you're going to go with this side down, go ahead and put it in between those 2 pieces, and then turn, and that is what is going to tighten up the blade. Now when you're carving, there's some really important kind of rules you have to follow. I'm going to use a number 2 blade here when carving. First of all, this flat side of the blade should stay flat on the linoleum. The top part of this blade should never dig under. It should never gouge the linoleum. It shouldn't be digging deep. You're only really removing a very, very thin amount, an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch. If you take a look at the carving that I did here, and you were to look at the edge of this, okay, you can see that there is minimal, and this is probably a harder one to actually see. Let me see if I have another one that would show that a little bit better. This one I started. This might be a little bit, but you see there's barely anything taken off here, just a tiny amount. So technically, if you were to get these tools at your home and you were to take this home, you would be able to do another carving on the back side. Okay. So to carve, you're going to place this flat side nice and flat, and I would start by maybe outlining some things. You don't have to, but some people find it a little bit easier. It's kind of like coloring inside the lines. This becomes, if you outline, this becomes that dark coloring book edge so that you don't go beyond that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of hold my carver flat. I'm going to press down and I'm just going to gradually turn. Now notice that my hand is behind the blade at all times. And you can see that that's making a little divot there. So I can go in and you're going to see you're going to have lots of these little scraps, shavings from your carving. Now again, the smaller the area you're trying to carve away, probably the smaller blade you should use. Take your time. It's not a race. And remember, once you cut something away, there's no putting it back. So when you're making your cut, you want to make sure really that that's exactly the cut that you want to make. And again, notice that I'm not cutting deep. My blade up here is always above my linoleum. And there you go. You can see the area that I've carved away. Now direction is going to be pretty important. Depending on your design, you want to think about the direction in which you're carving. So for instance, if we look at my example here, to show the eyes, to keep that roundness, I kept going in a circle. To show the hair, I did smaller little marks to show hair here. Also notice I stayed in similar directions. Up here, I decided to go straight across. Here I use that little V-liner tool, go vertical, and then notice that my feathers are all kind of going in the same kind of vertical diagonal direction. They're not every which way, and that's important. Again, this is going around. So how you choose to carve is really important. Please make sure that when you're done carving at the end of class, that you're pulling all your shavings together, and then you're going to pick these up and they get thrown away in the garbage. I should not be finding them on the floor. I shouldn't be finding them in the sinks, and they should certainly not be thrown around the room. Okay? Have fun carving. Good luck.